Welcome, everyone. Good evening. Thank you all for being here. I am Michael Barbaro, the host of The Daily, and your host for the rest of tonight. It is Thursday, June 10th. I've now said that twice today. And for many of you, that date means that the school year is over, or it is about to be over. And I think for the rest of us, it means that we're still working. It's just that it's 90 degrees outside and we are sweating through all of our Zoom calls. I am actually sweating right now. And we're here tonight really for two reasons. First off, because we have all made it through an exceedingly challenging and traumatic year. And we want to honor and celebrate that fact, especially the teachers and students and families who got through it. And the second reason we're here is because of one specific group of students and teachers who you and we all got to know on The Daily through a series called Odessa. And that is the students and teachers of Odessa High School. And you followed along as we documented their year, documented the quarantines that they experienced, the hybrid learning that they tried to pull off, band practices, bus rides, and above all, some very difficult decisions about what exactly it means to try to learn and to care about learning in the middle of a life-threatening pandemic. And so tonight, we are going to talk about all of that. We're going to go behind the scenes of the making of Odessa with one of the producers who created it, as well as a teacher and a student who were featured in the series. Then we're going to talk to a colleague of mine, an education reporter at the Times, about the state of learning right now across the country and what to expect next academic year. And then finally, and I'm very excited about this, we're going to hear from a surprise speaker who is going to deliver the commencement message that I really do believe all of us need to hear in this moment. And of course, we're going to do all of that in just a half hour, because here at The Daily, we believe in brevity, except for all the times that we give you an hour-long episode, which we try to make rare, but it happens. And first, we are going to hear from the one and only Odessa High School drumline, which, as listeners of Odessa know, is a main character in the series as it tries to keep playing throughout the pandemic. So thank you to the Odessa High School drumline and their director, Jimmy Olagi. That was fantastic. I want to bring onto the screen a member of that drumline, Joanna Lopez, who was a senior this year at Odessa High School. Hello, Joanna. We're going to bring on a teacher, Naomi Fuentes, who teaches seniors at Odessa High School. Hello, Naomi. And finally, one of the producers behind the Odessa series, Annie Brown, who has worked on The Daily pretty much since the show was born 4 years ago. Hello to all three of you. Thank you so much for being here. It is a very strange thing you will find in audio to get to know people through their voices and have no idea what they look like, and then finally see them all in person. So here you are in the flesh. Annie, I want to start this conversation with you. You reported and produced this series alongside several members of the Times audio team, who I want to cite by name here: Sindhu Yanasambandam, Soraya Shockley, Liz O'Balin, and Lisa Tobin. And I want to start, Annie, by zooming out with the question of why Odessa, Texas, of all places? How did you end up focusing on this school in this place?
So on the Daily, we knew we wanted to cover education deeply this year because we knew that education was really one of the most contentious, controversial, and consequential parts of this pandemic. And we wanted to go to a place where we would be able to see the tensions, the competing tensions of the pandemic play out in one place. And so in Odessa, you have an oil town that experienced an oil bust, an economic collapse at the beginning of the pandemic. You have a school system that was struggling before they had to shutter the classrooms in the spring. And you had on the first day of school, a COVID positivity rate of 19%. Mm-hmm. And it was all happening in a place where the governor of Texas had mandated that all schools reopen their classrooms. Mm-hmm. And so we knew that we were going to be able to see a lot of the tensions that were playing out across the country happening really in one place through the lives of the students and teachers in Odessa. And we were so grateful that they let us follow them around.
Right. Were you surprised that they said yes?
You know, the superintendent of Odessa was so generous that I was taken aback by just how open everyone in Odessa and at Odessa High were with us. I'm not sure that I would have that kind of courage, but I really admire it, and we were so grateful.
Right. I'm most grateful. Many of you may not know that this entire series was made remotely. I can't really think of a series of this ambition that was made without audio producers taking their microphones to a place to create the sound and the feel of it. And Annie, I understand you all made that decision for safety reasons, but I wonder what that meant exactly for productions, making such an ambitious, far-reaching series without actually traveling to a place.
Right. So what it meant was that we were actually asking the characters in this documentary to document much of their own lives. And there's a long history in documentary filmmaking and in audio documentaries of asking individuals to document their own lives. It actually puts the sort of power in the hands of the people on the ground. But what it means is that you are asking people to do a lot of work on their own, to say, like, just record everything, record your whole life. And they send you what they think is most interesting, most consequential. And sometimes you have to remind people, like, we do want to hear the boring parts of your life. We want to just live alongside you as much as possible. And what was really amazing was how much people were willing to do that. Mm-hmm. But what it did mean was that we got a bit of a glimpse of what I think teachers went through this year with trying to connect with people remotely.
Right.
And as people's lives got more complicated this year, as things got harder, we had a harder time staying connected with the characters and the people we got to know. And I felt a certain amount of empathy for these teachers who are just, begging for the students to come online, to tell them how they're doing, to just connect in some way. And so we decided to kind of just incorporate that whole experience into the actual documentary, because it felt representative of something about this year.
Right. Their challenge was your challenge. Their challenge being bigger because they're teaching students who are making a documentary, but similar. Naomi, you were one of the people on the other end of these calls that Annie and the Odessa team had as the main teacher that the series follows. And I understand that you ended up sending the team at the Times more than 100 audio recordings. Like, bravo. That's incredible. Tell me about documenting your year this way. What was that like for you?
It was strange. I have never been asked to, document everything. And Annie's right. At first, I was like, they're not going to be interested in the little things like the bells ringing or the passing periods in between classes. And they're like, no, no, get everything. And I didn't realize I sent them over 100 pieces of audio. I'm so sorry, but
No, that's great.
No, we loved it. We loved it.
And of course, those are just the sounds, but I wonder if you found it awkward to be walking around in your life recording everything. Did you feel like you needed to disclose that to people? And did you ever find it was uncomfortable?
yeah, sometimes I would forget to tell people like, oh, I have, I'm recording. And so that was interesting. But yeah, it was strange. Always just having to remember to do it was the big thing also. Having to remember to record this, make sure I mentioned this in my log. Yeah, that was a challenge actually.
Mm-hmm. And for you, Joanna, what did you think when the producers first asked if they could start to follow you? What did that even mean to you? We're going to follow you. We're going to document you.
It was really cool. It was really fun. I felt a little bit famous I felt honored that they actually were like interested and trying and wanting to work with me and follow me around.
Did you have any reservations, any concerns?
No. I was really excited.
I was really moved, Joanna, by the story that you told in this series. The fact that your dad had lost his job as a result of the pandemic, that you had to take your first job during the school year, during school hours, in order to help your family pay a bill. The fact that you shared your experience struggling with something very serious, an eating disorder, and that got worse through the year. And I wonder what it was like to share those personal details and ultimately to hear those personal details coming out of your own mouth when you heard the series.
So when I was talking about it to like Annie and everybody else, at first I didn't think anything of it. I was just kind of really open. But right after the call, I kind of cried because I talked about something really personal. And then I got scared because I didn't think about it at the time. But right after, it was just really scary because of what I just did. And it's going to be on there. And they were really, supportive, and they made sure I was okay with what was put out there. And so I really appreciated that.
Well, what kind of, to that point, I mean, it sounds like in the moment you didn't necessarily know the kind of meaning to yourself of what it would be to say it. Then afterwards you reflected on it. And then there, I assume, is this third stage where the world hears it and reacts to it. And I'm curious what kind of reaction you have heard from people who heard the series, listeners. Have they told you about their response to it? And what have they told you?
Yeah, so at first I was really scared about what people would say about me. And so that's the main thing I was scared about was, people, reaching out and telling me something that, would hurt my feelings. But people
generally, when people reach out on the internet these days, it's never very constructive. But
but people were actually really nice and reaching out to me, emailing me, sending me letters. They've sent me messages on Facebook as well. It's really cool because they're from different places. I got one from South Carolina, and then I got a letter sent from New York, and they sent it to the school, and the school was confused, like, why are you receiving letters from New York? But yeah, they've actually told me their story as well, and how it kind of touched them, and we kind of connected since we were like gone through the same thing, and they sent me information about some clinics around my area and OC, and so people have been really, really supportive and nice.
I wonder if any one letter or letter writer stands out to you.
I'm sorry?
Does any one of these letters that you got sent to the school, do they stand out to you? Can you describe one of them?
So I did the one from New York, she sent me a 3-page letter, and she was just telling me how, ever since she was little, she also went through an eating disorder, and how it was really, really hard on her, and it took years for her to, try and get some help, and so she was really, connected to me, and it made me really emotional because I didn't know I had like the power to, stand like out there and tell my story and touch other people's hearts. It's really cool.
My mother is standing on my shoulder, demanding I ask if you've written her back yet. In due time.
I tried. There's a lot.
Of course.
I do get a lot of messages, like emails and from Facebook. It's really crazy that they look me up on Facebook and message me on there.
It's remarkable.
I try and reach out as quick as possible.
Naomi, I was also very moved by what you said in the series and how vulnerable you were in the series, and how you shared with listeners the fact that the experience of teaching in this environment made you feel, in your own words, kind of inadequate. And there were times where you said you weren't sure you were up to this particular challenge and task as a teacher. And I wonder what it was like for you to say something like that. And then again, as I asked Joanna, to hear yourself saying it.
Yeah, saying it out loud, like it's the thoughts in our minds, but actually saying it out loud to someone made it real. And like Joanna said, a lot of people were emailing, and I had no idea that other people felt the same way I felt, other teachers, other administrators. I had no idea. I thought just what I was feeling is what I was feeling until the first episode aired, and that's when the emails came, and they were like, no, we feel the same way. And yeah, it was emotional. It was touching. It was like, wow, I'm not alone. This is happening. It was an awesome and emotional feeling.
Naomi, what do you think that ultimately you learned about yourself and about teaching from this year and from the series?
A lot. Well, first, thank you all so much for giving us this opportunity, because it stretched me way far out of my comfort zone. And, I always tell my students, you have to get out of your comfort zone to grow as a person, to learn, to be better. And I can't tell them to do that if I'm not willing to do that. So thank you all so much for the opportunity. But what I did learn is that you don't fail, and you're not a failure if you keep going. So that's kind of what I took away from it, is we just all have to keep going, no matter what we're going through. Our own experiences, we just can't give up.
Joanna, a lot of what the series ended up covering was the emotional toll of the pandemic. And you described that over the course of the months of the pandemic, you grew kind of more and more socially isolated. And you told us, and this was a bit surprising to me, that you were enjoying that you were happy with that, being alone. And it was interesting listening to the series, because mental health experts describe a very similar phenomenon, essentially kind of students of your age withdrawing. And they describe it as a mental health consequence of the pandemic, and it worries them. And sort of knowing that, listening to the series, knowing that your experience was viewed as something that experts are worried about, does it change the way you think about it? Do you still see this as a positive development in your life?
Looking back at it, I did feel, that happiness, and sometimes I still do. But, with people reaching out to me, saying that I should, go out and get some help, because it's not really good for your mental health. I kind of reflected back on it and realized how it really affected my social life. And when I go out in public, I get really scared and anxious, and so I develop some type of social anxiety. And so yeah, it's looking back on it, I feel like I could have done something, to try and socialize more instead of isolating myself.
Mm-hmm. I think we've all had that same struggle this year. You are absolutely not alone. We are all figuring it out. Naomi, when we think about this withdrawal phenomenon, people being less connected and desiring less connection, do you worry or do you feel like that's a permanent part of people's lives now when it comes to your students, or when this pandemic has started to wane and started to feel like it's coming to an end? Are you finding that has changed and gotten better?
I'm hoping it's gotten better. I do feel like it has changed a little bit, but that whole not logging into the classes, that was happening a lot. Like there'd be periods of time where students would just disappear. I would email, text, all kinds of ways, call, and I don't like calling people, but I would try, and they wouldn't answer, and then all of a sudden they'd pop back up towards the end of the year. So I'm hoping, and what I saw with a few of my students was towards the end, when they knew they were getting a traditional graduation, they were coming back. Little by little, they were coming back. So that I was like, good. I'm hoping that it gets better.
Mm-hmm. Well, speaking of graduation, Joanna, how did it feel to end this school year for you? And maybe help us answer a question that was kind of left in the air at the end of the series, which was, were you going to be able to graduate? So how did things end for you? What happened?
I did graduate. I ended up walking the stage, which was a big stress reliever, because I kept getting emails from my counselor saying that I need to keep an eye on my grades, keep an eye on my attendance, because I'm right on the line of not graduating, and so that really scared me. And then when I got the email from my counselor saying that, congratulations, you're an LHS graduate, I got really emotional because I went through a lot to walk that stage. So,
yeah. Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
I think I speak for everybody. That's wonderful news. And I want to thank the three of you for producing this really remarkable body of journalism and introspection and candor, and also for being here tonight with us. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. And now,
thanks, Michael.
Thank you, Joanna. Thank you, Naomi. Thank you, Annie. Now I want to share with you what some teenagers across the United States have shared with my colleagues at the Times, as part of the Times Learning Network, about what this year felt like for them. So as promised, we are going to now talk about what the pandemic and education during the pandemic looked like for the rest of the country. And for that, I'm going to turn to a colleague of mine, fellow reporter, Kate Taylor, who played the role of an advisor on the Odessa series and who really has her finger on the pulse of education in almost every way, and especially as it was affected by the pandemic. So Kate, hello. Thank you for coming and being with us tonight.
Thanks. My pleasure.
Kate, one of the things we learned from the Odessa series and from your reporting this year was that in the end, it was actually safer than people had feared to bring students back into the classroom in person, and that there was another crisis underway, and it was a quieter crisis of mental health, especially for students who didn't end up coming back into the classroom. So how much did that evolution in our understanding from kind of one assumed crisis to an unexpected crisis, how much did that surprise you as an education reporter?
Well, I think I expected that a year, in some cases, for some students, a year of missing school or many months.
Oops, I think, is Kate muted?
Sorry about that.
You're back. You're back.
Okay,
Yep.
great.
So was that a surprise for you, that evolution in our understanding?
Well, what wasn't a surprise was that kids were really negatively affected by being out of school. I think I predicted that and feared that that would be the case. What was a surprise was, of course, that it turned out to be relatively safe. Safe is a hard word to use, but it turned out that school could be done safely with a lot of safety protocols in place. And what was surprising about that was that you had this real spread across the country in terms of how states and districts approached reopening, with some just opening completely, almost like it was a normal year, and some staying closed for most or even all of the year. And some of those that opened very aggressively in the beginning didn't seem to be taking the virus that seriously. And that seemed sort of reckless at the time. And maybe some might say it was still reckless, but it turned out okay. And in some ways, looking back, they served some of their students better than those districts that were extremely cautious.
Right. In a sense, they took a chance. States like Texas, schools like Odessa took a chance. And I don't know, is it right to think that paid off? I mean, the right words kind of elude me, and maybe they elude you.
Yeah, I think in some places that seems to have paid off. And there were some states that were put a lot of other restrictions in place, but still reopened schools. I'm thinking of Rhode Island, for instance. In the states that just stayed open completely, it was kind of a trade-off. On the one hand, the students were benefited by being able to be in school, but often the decision to open schools went along with a decision to kind of keep everything open in a way that probably made the pandemic worse in this country.
Mm-hmm. What was striking to me about this series, and I think it's true across the country, is that no one was necessarily the bad guy or the bad gal here when it came to making these decisions. Everyone thought they were doing what was in everyone's best interest, it feels like, and making decisions with the information they had, sometimes that being very limited, like you said, but trying to keep people safe. And it feels like, as a result, the decision to keep certain schools closed or open them, even still in retrospect, looking back, can seem legitimate. Does that feel right?
Absolutely. At the beginning of the year, we knew so little about this virus and how it was going to work in schools. So there were good arguments on either side. It sort of depended whether you were more worried about the potential harm in terms of the spread of virus from opening schools, or the potential harm, which of course turned out to be very real, of students not being in school.
Right. But then I guess the question is, as time progresses and as the safety of students and the understanding of the safety of students changes, were some schools and some school systems just too slow to adjust to that new understanding and to reopen?
Many people would say that some districts and some states in general were too slow to reopen. The West Coast stands out as having been particularly slow to reopen. Some districts on the West Coast remain remote to this day, to the end of the year. Some opened up very late in the year. Los Angeles and San Francisco only opened to any students really starting in April. And because they had been closed for so long, a lot of families were reluctant to go back. So in Los Angeles, you saw 3/4 of students staying remote through the end of the year, and that's going to have real consequences.
So the longer this lasts, the more afraid people are? Is that the cycle you're diagnosing there?
I should be careful. Some people think that that's the case, that keeping schools closed sent people the message that schools weren't safe.
So how has this year, this pandemic year, based on your reporting, changed the education landscape? I know that sounds like a almost comically broad question, but let me try to narrow it. Like, what didn't we understand about education that we understand now because of what we've just been through? I mean, if basically this whole year was a kind of X-ray on the system, what has it revealed?
Right. Well, for one thing, people learned that online school can work in some circumstances and for some kids. There were some kids who were particularly self-motivated, maybe advanced students who had social anxiety, who did much better, or at least as well in remote learning. And that has potential in the future for when there are natural disasters that close schools, stuff like that. But we were also reminded how much the human interaction of school is important, how much it is a safety net for students and an escape from whatever is going on at home, whether it's intense parental supervision or something else. And, obviously, the effect of isolation was very devastating on a lot of kids, as we heard from Joanna in this series.
Right. So let's look ahead to this next year. I know it's still unsettled in some places, but what will be different in schools as a result of this past year?
Well, we're seeing a real divide between districts that want to continue offering remote learning because they think that's something that families are interested in, that some students did well in, and some families are still scared to send their kids back to school. And on the other hand, you have districts and whole states that see continuing remote learning as, again, a message to parents that schools aren't safe, and think that that's going to lead to a situation where more disadvantaged students perhaps may be kept out of school in a way that really does them harm. So you have some districts and states that are saying, that's it, no more online learning. It's not an option because they really want to get kids back to school.
But some that are still offering it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And what we're seeing in some of those places, I was looking at a survey recently from Arlington, Virginia, which is going to continue to offer remote learning, as apparently is Odessa. I was seeing a survey that showed that Black parents, Asian parents, Hispanic parents, core parents, parents of students who were still learning English were all much more likely to be choosing remote learning for next year than white parents, because the reasons they gave were generally continued concern about the virus. And so that's going to lead to potential inequalities in the education students are getting.
Mm-hmm. So much of what we talk about when we talk about education in this past year is about what has been lost because of the experience. And it's generally framed as a negative. And I wonder if there are any unexpected positives that you have seen and learned about in your reporting, heard from teachers or students?
Well, certainly many people describe an immense amount of loss, and that can't be overstated, really. But teachers did see some silver linings in it. Recently, I was interviewing a teacher of students who are English as a second language students in Salem, Massachusetts. And she was certainly very eager to see her students come back to school this fall and to herself come back to school. But she thought there was a silver lining in the time they had spent at home with their families in the spring. These were large, tight-knit immigrant families. And she thought it was valuable, these young children, to spend some more time learning their native language, which eventually she predicts they will speak less of than they speak English. And so she thought there was some value to that.
That really is a silver lining.
A small one, yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for helping make sense of this. And thank you from everyone on the Odessa team for helping consult and make sure that series covered this really complicated subject carefully and accurately. Okay, finally, as promised, we have reached the final act of our evening. And I want to start by congratulating all of you for making it through this year, not just students, not just teachers, but really all of us who have been through the past year. And to send us off, we wanted to make sure there was a proper commencement speech for you all to hear. And to help us do that, I'm very excited to introduce someone that I am personally a very big fan of, the star of the Netflix documentary series Cheer. If you haven't, watch it. A man who knows Texas, who understands what it means to overcome obstacles, the one and only Ladarius Marshall. For those who don't know Ladarius, really the only thing you need to know about this man is that he can do an incredible number of flips from a standing position. Watch the series. Watch it.
Hello, class of 2021, and to all the students, teachers, principals, and school staff who have made it through this crazy year. Thank you so much for letting me speak to you today. This past year has been very hard in ways none of us could have imagined. I myself had to cut things short. My team trained almost a year for a competition that's like the Olympics for college cheer, and it got canceled. And just like that, my time at college was over. No championship title, no graduation ceremony, just a farewell. But that's all right, because it transitioned me into the next phase of my life. Going after that coaching job I wanted, finding a healthy relationship, and focusing on the life I desire for myself. Here are a couple things I've learned from cheerleading and from life. First, no one gets through life alone. You don't need to be afraid to ask. If you don't know something and you suffer in silence, how are you ever going to grow? You need to ask for help. There are a lot of people in this world who have been through a lot of the things that you've been through, and they can help you. You're going to miss out on your blessings if you don't allow people to come in. Second, find your peace. When you have peace, your mental health is good. Sometimes you need to make time to be alone. What this pandemic has taught me and a lot of other people is how much we were using sports, places, and people to avoid the real problems that come from within. I had some personal issues myself before the pandemic, which required me to go in and to work on myself. It was a very hard thing, I can tell you. But if you start facing things and forgiving people, honestly, not for them, but for yourself, your mental state will be in a much better place. And yes, sometimes people don't deserve your forgiveness. But I promise you, when you do it, you will be in a better place because you're not walking around with that animosity. You're at peace. Third, there will always be ups and downs in life. Always. Just keep going. You hit your senior year of high school and the pandemic happens. You thought that someone was the love of your life and the relationship ends. Life is long, but just like the earth, you must keep going and pushing through. You don't have to be strong every day. Just remember that life does and will get better as long as you truly believe it. Finally, you might not always make that, but you can always learn from it. If you don't make that start spot, you learn from it. What did you not do? What could you have done differently? Can you learn from that mistake to propel yourself forward, to go forward into the next chapter of your life? In my first year on the Wildcats, I was an alternate because I wasn't good enough at co-eding. So I worked and I worked and I worked really, really hard. Finally, they had to pick between me and another guy. That was my propeller. I knew it. I knew that they wanted that tumbling. And I decided, even if it kills me, I'm going to get this tumbling skill. And I failed. I got hurt. And I messed up my knee. But I also told myself, how bad do I want it? I didn't give myself excuses. You got to want things more than a coach wants it for you, more than your teacher wants it for you, because your parents can only give you so much. It all comes down to, do you want it yourself? I can't wait to see what you guys do. Congratulations, class of 2021, and everyone who pulled through this year. I hope that you make that. You did it. You did it. We made it through the pandemic. You did it. You did it. We made it through the pandemic. Congratulations.
Thank you, Ladarius, especially for that cheer. To everyone who joined us tonight, thank you. You are subscribers. You make everything we do possible. You make this reporting possible that was behind Odessa. You make a series like Odessa possible. You make the daily possible. You make the miracle of the New York Times possible. So thank you all very much. And if you want to watch this event again, and why wouldn't you want to watch this event again? A recording of it, a full recording will be available on this exact same page very shortly. So check back, send it around. Thank you again for your support. Thank you from all of us at The Daily, Team Odessa, and the New York Times. Have a wonderful night.
I'm Elisa Gutierrez.
I'm MJ Franklin.
I'm Maya Phillips.
Hi, I'm Maliki Brown.
Each week, I dig up arguments that are unfolding in the country, around your kitchen table, or on Twitter.
I spend all day reading upcoming books and assigning and editing reviews to help you figure out what you want to read.
I write about theater, movies, TV, and pop culture.
My work relies on finding hard evidence, documents, photographs, and videos to find truth about events and hold the powerful to account.
One thing I never lose sight of, no matter where my work takes me, is that it's subscribers like you who make this work possible.
So on behalf of myself and all of the Times, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for being a subscriber
and supporting the work we do every day.